came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
Hey everybody, John with Owl, and you are not gonna wanna miss this video. That's because we're gonna do 6 cheap, if not totally free things to this Grenadier that are not only gonna make life better, but the last one could end up saving you thousands. You're not gonna wanna miss this. All right, for this first tip, it's time to travel down memory lane. And if you're anything like me and we're an 80s or a 90s kid, the best thing you could do in math class, slap bracelets. These aren't just for nostalgia though. These can be really, really useful when it comes to not forgetting your gear. Now you can buy these are Camco. You can buy them with stuff already written on them. I wrote Starlink on this one is Vents. But you can also just buy white ones on Amazon, like 100 of them for a few bucks, and you can write whatever you want on them. So now let's pop inside and show you exactly how I use these. So if you have something far away and you don't want to forget, it could be anything, leveling blocks, Starlink, your Safari windows. You just slap this slap bracelet right on the steering wheel, and then it hangs right there. So you're ready to leave camp, you're all ready to get home, and then you get in your car and you go, oh, Starlink, because this is staring you right in the face. I absolutely love this. And you can put more than one. You can write things like no oil, because if you're working on your car and you can't finish something, you can put this on your vehicle and say no oil, and then nobody else in your household is gonna get in your car and drive it away. So I keep a stack in my vehicle all the time, and I never know what I'm gonna use it for. Almost all of you probably have the Safari window option on your vehicle because, let's face it, they're totally awesome. But what's not totally awesome, especially like here in Arizona, is how hot you can get when the sun pours in through those Safari windows. In fact, I bet a lot of you didn't even know you can remove them entirely. That's right, you undo this latch and then they lever out and you can take them completely off the vehicle. And that's important for this next tip, and that is learning how to tint them yourself. There's no reason to spend a bunch of money at a tint shop. You can either darken them with an actual tint, or you can use a thermal. It's a little bit more expensive, but this is actually a clear thermal barrier. And what it's gonna do, it's gonna reflect all those UV rays that actually cause that heat from the sun. And so you can put this on and keep your windows clear, and it's gonna keep the inside of your vehicle that much cooler. And if you wanna block out the sun because it's getting in your eyes, you can buy this stuff on Amazon. I just unbolted this and hand cut it around my whole window, and now you can see how tinted it is. So for these Arizona sunny days, I've got tint for about 20 bucks. Anyone that's driven a Grenadier has noticed a quirk about the steering. Not only does it not return to center, but it also has a huge turning radius. It can make it hard to make U-turns and turn around trails, etc. Now, you can't make a massive difference, but you can make a small difference, which in some turns makes all the difference. Now, I think I've said difference enough, so let's show you what we're doing. All right, folks, so this is NASA level testing we've got going out here. And I have done a circle with this Grenadier. So now you're gonna, with all of the enjoyment possible, watch me do another circle in Grenadier. And we're gonna use that circle as our before. And then we're gonna make some modifications and see if we did anything to help. For this next tip, we're gonna get nice and cozy with our steering. Now, in here you can see where the wheel mounts and this bolt right here and this nut behind it. And then you see this big hunk of steel here. Now, as I push this wheel, one of the things you will notice, that hits that bolt. And that stops the amount of turn that you can put into the steering wheel. Basically, the steering wheel is gonna stop turning. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen this. It's a 19 mil. So one thing you do wanna keep in mind here is if you just take the bolts out, you're actually gonna allow too much steering angle and you can damage some other parts of your steering. So your options when you take this out are to move the nut all the way against the bolt, and that's gonna give you, it only looks like about a ½ inch here, but it's gonna equate to a lot more when we get back out to that circle. The other option when you take this out is to stack some washers there and get even more turning angle. So first thing I'm gonna do is grab a 19 millimeter wrench and pop that out. So now that you've got this out, you can already see some corrosion on that bolt. So what I'm gonna do actually is I'm gonna put this in some clamps and I'm gonna tighten this up and take this off. And then I'm gonna put some anti-seize on this just to keep this from corroding any further in case we ever wanna take it out in the future. like all things, when you leave a toolbox unlocked, people borrow things and don't put it back. So I don't have anti-seize with me. You see how there's some rust happening there? There's some corrosion there. So I'm just gonna take a brush, because I don't have my anti-seize, I'm just gonna brush that lightly and try to get all that stuff off there. I just don't like it because it binds up. In fact, you can see it all coming off here on the ground. What I'm gonna use is some blue Loctite. That blue Loctite is gonna lubricate that, and then once it dries, it's gonna keep that nut on. With the retained factory nut technique, you can get it almost all the way down against that nut, and then when you screw it back in, which will take a little while because of how long it is, now that the nut is jammed against the bolt, I'm just gonna tighten the whole assembly and make it pretty tight. So now you can see we've taken about a ½ inch out of what used to be there. So now if I turn this wheel, we've gotten a ½ inch more turning radius on that outside wheel. What I'm gonna do now is show you how to do it with washers. So I went through my tool bin and found a couple of washers, and you wanna obviously make sure that they clear the bolt, which they do. You don't want a ton of play in them, and they can't be too big because of the area that we have to seat them. And then when you stack them up, you want them to be ever so slightly shorter than the nut. Hopefully you can see that. These look like they're about 2 or 3 millimeters shorter than the nut, but they're also gonna sit all the way flush, so you're gonna gain another millimeter or 2. So we're gonna put this back in with those 2 washers, and that will give us the ultimate turning radius on a Grenadier. So now if you get a close look at that, we've got no gaps. Those washers sit flush against that bolt, and we've taken now, I would say, almost 3/4 of an inch out of that turning radius. So now when I turn this, you're gonna get even more, and you wanna make sure you feel it and test it. Nothing seems to be binding. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side and do the same thing and make sure it's not binding, and then we can go back out and see how much success we've had. Now, assuming I didn't just waste everyone's time, we should be able to run rings around our old turning radius. See what I did there? Rings with the rate. I'm gonna drive now. Now, I'm no mathematician. I'd say that's about 6 feet. That ain't bad. That's a cheap hack. And just a real quick reminder, if you're doing this steering fix to get more steering angle, it does require the use of an aftermarket steering stabilizer. So I don't know how far you can push it with the stock one, because our stock one is long gone. This is a Fox ATS, which we really, really like. We also have our own, as well as King and a number of other companies that make them, but you have to have an aftermarket. All right, so let's talk about caster. Now, caster is part of your wheel alignment. So you have camber, caster, and toe. Camber is how much your tire is vertical. All right, toe is how much both tires are parallel, toed out, toed in. And then there's caster. And caster, if you've ever looked at the front of a bicycle, the front doesn't go straight down into the wheel because it would make it really, really unstable. And then you see those Harleys, they're real laid back. Basically, the front wheel is attached on something that's really laid back. So basically, how the suspension attaches to the center line of the wheel is your caster. Now, the more vertical your caster, the faster things turn, but the more something's gonna wander on the freeway. You take a car like a Mercedes-Benz sedan that's meant for cruising at 160, they're gonna put a lot of caster in it because it's gonna tend to track very straight. So one of the simple fixes for these, because they're a little twitchy on the freeway, if you've chosen not to do our steering box upgrade, which solves all of this, is to adjust the caster. Now, this is a Band-Aid. It helps a little bit. Doesn't help a ton, but it does help a little bit. So I'll show you what we're gonna do. We wanted to reshoot this and orient you as to where we were. The steering video was talking about the front of the driver's side wheel, and then for this caster adjustment, we're actually gonna come back in here, and we're gonna be looking right here. Now, we'll light this better for the video, but I just wanted to give you an idea. This is now the passenger side of the vehicle looking out towards the front so that you know where to find this lower link. and where that caster adjustment is. Now on a solid axle vehicle, you're gonna have control arms or links. This is a lower link, this is your upper link. Now you can very simply see that as we push the lower link forward, you're gonna change the caster of the vehicle. We ended up welding ours because we off-road and we broke the tabs off the side, but there are normally walls right here with an eccentric. An eccentric is a bolt that's kind of out of round with the washer. You can rotate it to push this whole arm forward. It's part of the alignment spec. Now what I do, I just go ahead and loosen this up. You don't need an alignment rack, and just push the caster all the way as far forward as you can get, crank down on it, and you're done. What we did is we slid it all the way forward and we welded it in place so we never have to worry about it again. You can still take the bolt out, but we welded the washer that holds the bolt there permanently. And what that does, again, it takes the bottom of this wheel, it moves it forward, and it's gonna make the vehicle track that much straighter at freeway speeds. So for the fifth tip, it is not fashion, although I am gonna be fashion forward with these cool goggles or glasses because these Ray-Bans have a camera in them. So I'm gonna slide under this rig and kind of show you what I see. And also, I think they're recording. Well, we'll know in the video. So regardless of how ridiculous I look right now, and no, you're not allowed to make fun of me, we are gonna address the low range shift cable. So this involves a drill, and no, you're not really gonna drill through like the body of your vehicle or anything, so don't be nervous. This is super easy, and some zip ties. There are brackets that are sold for this, but this is such a simple, easy fix that I'm just gonna do it like this. So what we're looking at right here is this is the low range shift cable, and it's got this little fitting on here that is supposed to be connected here, and you can see it's already popped off. It's quite stiff. And what we're trying to work around, if you can see from my glasses, is right here is your front drive shaft. This can actually sag and it can hit that front drive shaft and make a ton of noise. And so people zip tie these things to all kinds of things. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drill a small hole in this heat shield. It's not a very big deal, but you also don't wanna go through. So I've got just a little piece of scrap metal laying around. If you have anything, wood, piece of scrap or something, I'm gonna stick this back there so that the drill bit cannot go through and actually damage anything above it. And then also you want to keep your eyes out of it. You want to make sure your drill bit doesn't hit your drive shaft, and you want to keep your eyes out from under it because you do not want to get metal flakes in your eyes. All right, so we went right through. We hit the metal piece that we put in there kind of as a backer. And then we're just going to take some zip ties and we're going to zip tie this cable right up to this heat shield. Now watch the back side of it's probably going to be a little bit sharp. You're going to want to watch your fingers. And we don't have to put a ton of tension on it. We're just trying to keep it from sagging. So I've now got it to a point there where this is not going to sag and hit that drive shaft. And then I'm going to clip off the excess. And now your low range shift cable is up and against your heat shield. It's held up there quite nicely, and it's going to stay away from your drive shaft. So this is a really, really quick and simple way to keep that from hitting your drive shaft and making all that noise. This last tip is one that I mentioned at the beginning could save you thousands of dollars. Anyone that's owned a Grenadier or even like a Jeep Wrangler or driven anywhere in Arizona knows that rock chips are your worst enemy. Everything around here is landscaped with rock, and inevitably you're gonna get chips. And the problem is these windshields are thousands of dollars. So my recommendation is A, carry a small window patch kit with you in your vehicle at all times, because what starts as a small chip, if you can't get it fixed quickly, just from temperature and humidity changes, it can turn into a full crack, which means you have to replace your entire windshield, which again, on a Grenadier is thousands and thousands of dollars. One of the things they can't fix, and you can't fix even if you have that road kit, is a chip in the edge of the window. So most windshields have this clear space that you obviously look through, and then there's this kind of darkened strip around the edge, and if you get a crack in that darkened edge, they won't fill it. All the major windshield brands say, no, we can't do it because it doesn't last and it's probably gonna crack anyway. But there's a really simple fix. This is just some trim that I got off of Amazon. We'll put the link in the description. It's basically got 3M adhesive. It's a little bit flexible, but it's also fairly rigid. And it also looks very OEM. So what we're gonna do is, first thing is we're gonna clean this off. I like alcohol because I don't mean that I like alcohol. I mean, I like using alcohol to clean it because it's not going to leave much residue, so like a rubbing alcohol or something like that. So you give the edge of your window a really nice clean. We've kind of already done that. What you want to do is this up here where you kind of have this rubber fascia, you can actually go from that point, and it really depends on how much effort you want to put into doing this right, but you can also start at dead center. I actually think that it looks better to end the strips under this because you can't see the line where the strip starts and stops, but you could also start in the center and go all the way around. So for purposes of this video, I'm going to start this one right under that strip, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run this down here, and then we're going to use a heat gun, and we're going to get this nice and warm so it's pliable and it bends, and then we're going to run this along the windshield all the way up the other side. So if you're not familiar with heat guns, this is a portable heat gun, but obviously you can get heat guns pretty cheaply. Harbor Freight has them. They just basically, you pull the trigger and it gets really, really hot, and that makes plastic pliable. We're going to start this under this kind of trim piece here. I'm going to peel off the adhesive backing here. It's just that 3M backing, and I'm going to peel it off in segments as I go. I'm not going to peel the whole thing at once. So again, we're going to start it under that gasket, and you want to push the edge towards the window so it sits nice and flush. I'm kind of running my thumb down this groove, and then it's attaching to the window, and then I'll go back up and press really hard, and then at the very end, I've talked about it in other videos as well, I'll use a decal roller just to make sure that I get this down nice and solid. You can already see it looks totally OEM. In fact, I think it kind of finishes off the window quite nicely. Now this bend is where we're going to want to use the heat gun, and once we adhere it and use the heat gun, it's actually going to have a bit of memory, and it's going to stay nice and flat to the window. So you're just going to heat this up until you feel it start to get a little pliable. And then we're going to do the same technique and run this along the bottom. So what you can do is, once you get kind of over here, you can kind of roughly measure it so you're not working with so much material. Just don't cut it short, or you got to start all over. Then I'm going to trim it just so it's under that rubber again, so you don't see the joint. And you can come in real close here, and you can see how nicely this lays down with that heat gun. It's still a little bit warm, but you can see it contours to that window very, very nicely, and it'll actually stay. And then you can come back in here and just make sure that all of this is laid down. And then I'm going to come in lastly and do one along the top. And I'm going to hide it in that area there. This one gets a little bit trickier as far as reaching. So if you happen to know an NBA basketball player, now's the time to give them a call and use their giant wingspan. But I'm going to run this across so I get a general idea on length. So I'm just going to clip it here. That way we're not working with this giant bundle. It's really about a 10-minute job as long as you have a heat gun. And again, we'll put the link to this material in the description. You want to get this nice and hot when you turn those corners so that you're not going to get any bubbling or anything like that. And then we actually, when we travel to shows, these things are so prone to getting chips. We're actually working with different companies for different films that we could possibly sell. We're going to test those out. But in the meantime, we've replaced the windows on these things so many times that this is actually heading off to SEMA right after we shoot this video. We have a giant piece of basically plexiglass that we cut to cover the windshield. This has a film on it, so this film will come off. This is obviously not a permanent solution, but we're going to take the film off, and we're going to actually adhere this with double-sided tape. It'll be clear to the front windshield so that when we get to SEMA, there's no fresh rock chips in it, because driving through Arizona and then up into Nevada is really, really prone for rock chips. So those are some of the ways that we can help save you thousands of dollars on your windshield. And hopefully all of the tips and tricks in this video you found benefit in. They're all fairly inexpensive, easy, and fun things to do so that you can make your Grenadier your own. We've got lots of other videos with other Grenadier tips and ways to make this an even more capable rig, both on-road and off.